Hello and welcome to Money Matters. I am Folashade Ogurinde. In the past 3 to 6 months, Nigeria's economic climate has evolved significantly. These trends, however, are sadly not in the favor of the nation's strategies for economic growth. For instance, Nigeria's inflation rate increased from 14.23% in October 2020 to 18.17% in March. As if that's not alarming enough, NNPC served the federal government a notice of zero remittance to the federal purse for the months of April and May after spending 120 million naira to subsidize petrol in March. Now, if we place these developments with the CBN's report that foreign direct investment dipped by 33.3% from $90 million recorded in December 2020 to $60 million in January, there would be obvious cause for concern. Other issues on the front burner are Nigeria's depreciating foreign reserve, rising debt profile and devaluation of the naira. Joining me to discuss this issue is economic analyst Johnson Chukwu, the CEO of Kari Asset Management Limited, and Gospel Obele, the CEO of Street Economics Capital. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming on the program. Now, I'll begin with you, Mr. Chukwu, on the curious case of NNPC's notice on zero remittance to the federal government. With NNPC being the largest contributor to the national purse, where does this place Nigeria on financial terms?
Thank you, Folashade, for having me or having us in this program. The key thing is that, like you rightly pointed out, NNPC is the largest contributor to the Federation account, federal government account, or the Federation account. And NNPC has served the notice that it wouldn't be in a position to make significant contribution for the next 2-3 months, principally because NNPC is spending so much on fuel subsidy. And if you recall, NNPC and the Minister of State for Petroleum had repeatedly made an announcement that Nigeria is going to pull back from subsidizing petroleum products. But unfortunately, we have not mustered the political will to do that. So what is happening today is that we are spending the money that should have gone to the Federation account in subsidizing petroleum products because it's deducted as a first line item before arriving at what is distributable to the state, federal and local government. So until we take the difficult decision or difficult political decision to do away with subsidy, we're going to be dealing with a situation where we export crude and then import refined petroleum products. We're importing 100% of our current consumption today, and not only that, we're importing to subsidize neighboring countries because they also leverage on the low cost of fuel in Nigeria to ensure that products are exported to their country. It's a choice we have made, and that choice is a choice between taking the difficult decision to do away with petroleum subsidy and then having enough resources to be invested in infrastructure, in education, in healthcare, in security, or otherwise pay subsidies and not point to where the money is going to, and then do not have enough resources for critical infrastructure and critical security.
Mr. Obele, what do you make of the decline in foreign direct investment, and how much impact do you think this will have on the economy?
The idea of foreign direct investment largely hints on the state of the economy at the time, the level of productivity in that economy, and how secure that economy is and open for investment in terms of enabling business and all that. And if you look at it on all these counts, the nation ranks poorly on these indicators, and to a very large extent as a result of large-scale economic mismanagement and the low level of productivity in the economy. Yes, and being also that the political economy has not clearly defined a form of direction for the year, and what the fiscal strategy or goals and objectives or aspirations are. So all of this coming together largely defines or shapes the FDI position of the economy, all right? And also the worsening state of the naira, which has been attributed to a large extent more around structural than policy issues, all right, currently puts FDI inflows at risk. So these are the critical structural things that need to be considered, all right, before we can scale into that level of FDIs. And also FDIs that cuts across different sectors, not just screwed FDI growth in what sense. Thank you.
Now, Mr. Chukwu, this question is directed to you. Despite the backlog of a total public debt profile of 32.92 trillion naira, the Senate approved a fresh external loan of $1.5 billion and 995 million euros for the federal government. Should Nigerians be worried at this point?
Yes, I think Nigerians should be worried, but the worry should be within some perspective. And I say it with all seriousness. One is the first is that we've seen a ballooning of our debt profile, but it's not just that we've seen a ballooning of the debt profile. The challenge is that the debt we have accumulated over the past couple of years, we can't point to fiscal infrastructure that it was invested in. So the key worry is not just that the country's debt profile is increasing. It's the major challenge that we are not investing it in productive assets so that in the medium to long term, the revenues or the increase in productivity as a result of the debt we have accumulated will generate revenues from which the debts can be paid back. But interestingly, the 1.5 billion that the Senate has approved is supposed to go into specific infrastructure, but that's infrastructure related to improvement of agricultural mechanization. And my concerns are issues of agricultural mechanization should be left in the hands of private sector operators. If the government wants to invest in irrigation and irrigate major swaths of Nigerian land, then that could be understandable. But if you are going to be spending that money on getting tractors and equipment, which should be the duty and responsibility of private sector farmers, industrial farmers, I think that would be a misplaced priority, because ultimately what the government wants to do is go to equipment and lease them out to private sector operators at subsidized rates, which will ultimately not allow for the recovery of the money we've invested. So I think the problem is not just that we're borrowing. The greatest problem is that we're borrowing and spending in things we shouldn't be spending on. The government should pull back from engaging in business activities that should be left for the private sector operators. And then, if the government must borrow, it must borrow for capital goods, infrastructure, so that we will expand the stock of infrastructure in the country and ultimately improve the ease of doing business and cost of doing business.
And now, Mr. Chukwu, you made a very valid point with regards to the federal government more or less creating a balance between expenditure and revenue. But Mr. Albeli, I'd like to get your perspective on this. You know, I spoke to an economist one time, and he told me that at the rate Nigeria is going, we would keep on borrowing and borrowing. What do you think about this?
Yes, to a very large extent, because the fundamentals around revenue mobilization and productivity of the economy itself, all right, is not in view, all right? And then also to state that a lot of developed and advanced economies also borrow. So technically, it's not so much of a bad thing, like Mr. Johnson Chukwu mentioned, it's what it's being used for, you know, and how much of that borrowing chunk goes into the productive assets of the economy. All right. And then if you look at the budget again, the budget spread, we also realize that a critical chunk is also used in debt servicing. A critical chunk goes to recurrent expenditures, and a very low percentage, less than 30% still, goes to capital expenditure. Then if you look at it on a year-on-year basis, in terms of budget implementation, you realize that capital expenditure sees less than about 1/4 of its aspirations or goals being met. All right, so it means that we are more hasting to spend more on to meet the recurrent and debt servicing goals than the capital expenditure goals in our fiscal year. So that means that technically, year-on-year basis, we have put ourselves in a situation where we will need to borrow some more to keep funding the recurrent and the debt servicing side. All right. And
now Mr. Albeli, based on your last point, now you said Nigeria will keep on borrowing, but is there an end to this?
What seems like an end to it will be fixing the structural and infrastructural base of the economy and unlocking the non-oil space, all right, and ensuring that you have a thriving SME or business sector in the sense that can contribute back to the economy. Then we can that can in itself, all right, add some significant value back to the economy, and government also reprioritizing its public expenditure goals and objectives. So you have more around capital than recurrent, and also reworking the cost of governance and all of that. So it's going to take different pockets of fixing and rejigging the economy for us to see a significant level of growth that may enable our borrowing process to become easier over a period of time. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mr. Billy. But gentlemen, we'll take a pause here, but Money Matters returns after this break.
Hello? Yeah, I found your wallet in front of a supermarket. Meet me at Apple Junction. Yes, I'll be waiting for you.
Now we find out. Two of us.
Thank you very much, officer. You know, it's surprising that men like you still exist in the police force.
Yes, so...
Oh, yes.
This is just a token of my appreciation.
Oh, no, you don't need to do this. We're only doing our job.
Thank you very much. God bless you.
You're welcome.
Now I know police is really my friend.
Yes.
Friend. Hey. Okay, which came up with this one? I don't understand.
You know your problem. You are greedy. I'm a policeman who is doing his job. All forms of corruption in the force. Not in my country.
Corruption not in my country.
Welcome back to Money Matters. If you're just tuning in, I've been discussing emerging economic trends in Nigeria with economic analyst Johnson Chukwu and Gospel Obele. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for staying. Now, I'll begin with Mr. Chukwu on this. This discussion would not be complete without talking about the rise in inflation rates. Between the space of 6 months, the inflation rate has jumped from 14.23% in October 2020 to 18.17% in March 2021. And with the look of things, it doesn't look like it would abate anytime soon. How does this place Nigeria?
The challenge we have with inflation is principally because of the dislocation of farmers in many parts of the country. So for us to address the rising inflation rates, we need to address the core cause of that inflationary pressure. If you look at current inflation rates, I mean the inflation rate for the month of March, you will observe that food inflation was 22.95%, whereas all item inflation was 18.17%. So if you look at core inflation, which is excluding volatile food items, it just about less than 13%. So you realize that the pressure that we're witnessing on inflation is coming from food inflation. Like I said, the food inflation in March was 22.95%, up from 21.79% that it was in February. And as long as we are witnessing this heightened level of insecurity where farmers are displaced in the northeast, in the northwest, in the north central, and now it's turning to the southeast, then you would have to contend with the fact that we'll continue to produce less and less goods because a lot of people who should be producing those food are in IDP camps. And as long as we don't address that, we're going to continue to deal with rising inflation rate, which is largely driven by food inflation. Of course, the other inflationary pressure that may come to bear as we progress in the current year, there is already a discussion to adjust the tariff on power energy supply that's under the multi-year tariff order. So if that adjustment is effected, it will bring additional pressure. And then, although the government is holding back on the review of fuel prices, starting with a pushback by NNPC, they said, look, they no longer have money to contribute to the preferential accounts because fuel subsidy is completely taken up what they should have contributed. So if eventually the government gets to the point where they decide to take out fuel subsidy, you're going to see additional pressure on prices coming from increase in fuel prices. So these are the pressure we have to deal with. But the first thing we have to deal with, address the issue of insecurity so that farmers can go back to their farmlands and understand places like Zamfara State, people have to pay taxes to the bandits to be able to go to their farms. Places like Kaseda State. So until we address the issue of displacement of farmers, we will not resolve the issue of increasing inflationary rate because inflation will moderate when productivity increases, and productivity is being hampered by insecurity.
Now, still talking about security, currently in Nigeria, it's no longer news that almost all part of the north, the northwest, the northeast, and down to the south, the southeast, they're currently battling with security issues. And you've also highlighted the fact that food plays a major role in Nigeria's inflationary rate or pressure. Are you saying that for the next or throughout 2021, Nigerians should expect increasing inflation?
Yeah, it's looking that way because remember we have not even gone fully into the planting season when ordinarily food prices go up. We are still dealing with post-harvest season, and I don't have enough harvest of food items because if you further disaggregate the food inflation, you realize that there's from basic food items like tuber, like cereals, tubers like potato, yam. These are not imported food items. They are food items that are produced locally. So if farmers are displaced in Benue State, displaced in Plateau State, you're going to see scarcity of yam in the economy, and that is leading to an uptick in inflation. So by the time we even get to the planting season, when volume of food items will further reduce, and the most important factor is that the people who should be in the farms are in the IDP camps, let's say entirely displaced persons camps, and if they don't go back and plant, we will be relying on imported food items. Those imported food items we already have a ban on importation of rice, but we're not producing enough of those rice. And reality is that unless we address this core problem, we should prepare our mind to deal with less and less productivity and higher level of inflation.
Well, this is really serious. Now, Mr. Obele, I'd like to get your reaction to this. In February 2021, the CBN Governor Godwin Emefiele confirmed that the Naira has been depreciated at the official market to 410 Naira against the dollar. He said the adjustment was to boost exports in order to earn foreign exchange. Do you agree?
All right, so to a large extent, I disagree because the question around appreciation or depreciation of the Naira is largely on the level of productivity in the economy and hasn't really been a function of the amount or effectiveness or the level of policy that the monetary institution has rolled out in recent times. So it's first the productivity of the Nigerian economy first, all right, before we talk about the policies of the monetary institutions. And that's because the core risk associated with the currency at the moment are largely structural than policy driven. All right. So what the central bank has been trying to do has been trying to use policies to correct for structural misalignment. So until structural issues are fixed, all right, we may not be able to fix issues around the currency appreciating or depreciating anytime soon. Okay, so that's first said. Secondly, it will interest you to know that the conversations around access to finance for exporters, all right, are largely hinged in different pockets, all right? So you have a situation where the CBN do not properly align with the commercial banks. The commercial banks do not have an effective export desk. You have issues where regulatory agencies and even promotion agencies do not properly align on functions and all of these things. So the ecosystem around exports, especially non-oil export, does not facilitate for ease of access to finance. So the conversation is way beyond adjusting whatsoever in the official market. And also it's interesting to know that the majority of exporters actually get access to foreign currency in the black market, not even in the official market. So
now, speaking about that, I recall, was it the last MPC meeting? There were in the question and answer session, Godwin Emefiele actually responded to a question with regards to banks holding forex, and basically he said that a customer care line will be set up in order to look into these issues, and now you're raising it. Please go on.
Yes, so those are the level of misalignments that exist. All right, if you go to the commercial bank, they'll tell you they are not aware, or they do not even have a structured export financing desk in the commercial banks. All right, so there's a strong misalignment between what's going on in the CBN and what's happening in the different commercial banks. And then to take it further down on their export desk to facilitate for export financing, So it's a very, very technical situation, all right? And exporters have had to resort to dealing with all those different pockets of alignment, as well as interfacing with the parallel market to source for international currencies and all of that to facilitate trade. So the issues on ground are way beyond just adjusting in the official market. Take, for instance, how the average Nigerian who does business, it's relatively very difficult to even access, go to the banks. The banks will tell you they don't sell or buy foreign currency. So you're literally left with the black or current or parallel market to deal. So these issues are way more around institutional alignment, all right, and recognizing that the issues are structural than policy driven. And let's stop using the policy to correct structural issues, all right, and ensure that the export ecosystem, we could probably build a form of financing that works for the non-export ecosystem. And to ensure also that these dynamics aligns with improved access to market. And that's the only way it can make sense. Because if we work on the financing end and businesses can seem to export, but they do not have access to market. And access to market has to do with documentation, infrastructure, air infrastructure, cargo infrastructure, and all these things. Except there is access to market, meeting with access to finance, then we may not be able to improve the convertibility or competitiveness of the currency. All right, so the currency would not appreciate in the sense if we're dealing with the situation from just an access to finance perspective. It has to be a complete system overhaul, all right, and ensuring that both institutions, markets, financing arms, and even government regulation agencies are working in sync, all right, to enable exporters thrive. And that's when we can say the currency either appreciates or depreciates, all right, based on that conversation, not necessarily the official market exchange rates, all right, the exchange rate in the official market as mentioned by the central bank.
And now, gentlemen, of course, this is a continuing issue because Nigeria's case is one that one needs to really, really look into. But let me get your final thoughts with regards to 2021, that's Q2, Q3, and Q4. What are your projections? Yeah, Mr. Chukwu, you can go on that.
Okay, I think unless we address the insecurity issue, all bets are still off. As it stands today, nobody can hazard a guess on where the country will be politically in the next 6 months. We are witnessing a country that is gradually descending into a state of anarchy, where police stations are attacked at will. And once you disable security agencies, the society goes into a state of anarchy. Because if you can't call a policeman to protect you when your rights are infringed upon, then you will be forced to go and defend yourself. And that's unfortunately the direction we're going to. So I think the government, the people in governance, should need to quickly pull back the country from the precipice so as to avoid the country degenerating into a state of anarchy. Every other economic factor will be dependent on the security situation. If you listen to major news items in the country or read newspapers, 99% of discussions now or articles are around security issues. So for me, the economy is now going to take a second stand behind security challenges. How the economy will fare in the third and fourth quarter will depend on how stable we restore our security situation.
Indeed, Mr. Chukwu. Mr. Abele, your final projections for 2021.
Yes, I would strongly want to recommend that the central bank, taking a cue from what Mr. Johnson Chukwu mentioned, the central bank can revisit the state of the Nigerian economy in line with the fiscal authorities. I think there is a growing divergence between the fiscal side and the CBN, and the CBN is probably undertaking way more than its core mandate as an institution. And as a result, delving into sectors and engagement like a bit more distracting than the core of what it should be doing. So there needs to be conversations around fixing the structural issues first, than trying to use policy as an instrument to fix structural issues. Structural issues are structural issues, and they are core around infrastructure, they are core around institutional capacity, they are core around enabling business environment. And then we talk about policies and ensuring that policies are not introduced as a one-off or as a one-time or as an outright engagement. All right. If you're seeking to ban an item, then you should rethink banning that item in stages and reviewing what other elements in society or in the economy will be affected as a result of this singular decision. All right. So the Nigerian economy is way more complex than it has ever been before, and there are strong structural misalignment issues underlying on the Nigerian economy. So I would expect a lot of review around that, and of course the political will and the political capacity to deploy accordingly, which in this case relatively seems very slim, in my opinion.
Well, certainly, we'll definitely keep our eye on these issues, but we have no choice than to be optimistic that, Nigeria would somehow be better. And perhaps government would take the advice of gentlemen like you and, basically improve the economy. But a big thanks to you, gentlemen, for your time on the program. Johnson Chukwu, CEO of Kari Asset Management Limited, and Gospel Obele, the CEO of Streetnomics Capital. Thank you very much for coming on the program.
Thank you for having us.
Pleasure.
Well, it's a wrap on this episode of Money Matters. I am Fola Shadi Ogrinde. Bye for now.